The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Violet Vaughn pressed trembling fingers against the bruised socket of her left eye, wincing as pain radiated through her skull. She had traveled 3 weeks from Boston to San Diego, California, to marry a man she had never met, and the evidence of her brother's farewell gift throbbed with every heartbeat. Through the dusty window, she could see the town spreading before her in the late afternoon sun of August 1878. Adobe buildings baking in the heat, wooden storefronts lining the dirt street, and somewhere among them, the ranch where Emmett Fitzgerald waited for his mail-order bride. The driver opened the door, and Violet stepped down onto California soil, her green traveling dress dusty and wrinkled from the journey. She carried only one small trunk, everything she owned in the world packed into that battered leather case. The air smelled different here, dry and warm with hints of sage and ocean salt carried on the breeze from the Pacific. Women in light cotton dresses paused their shopping to stare, and men in worn work clothes leaned against porch railings, watching the new arrival with undisguised curiosity. Miss Vaughn, a weathered man in his 60s, approached, removing his hat to reveal silver hair. "I'm Tom Hendricks, foreman at the Fitzgerald Ranch. Emmett sent me to fetch you." Violet turned to face him, and she saw the precise moment his eyes registered the purple and black bruise that swelled her left eye nearly shut. His weathered face hardened, jaw tightening, but he said nothing, just picked up her trunk and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. The ride to the ranch took 40 minutes along a dusty trail that wound through scrubland dotted with oak trees. Tom made polite conversation about the ranch, the cattle, the drought that had finally broken last spring, but Violet could barely focus on his words. Her mind spun with fear and shame, wondering what Emmett Fitzgerald would think when he saw her face, whether he would send her back to Boston on the next stagecoach, whether she would have to return to her brother's house, where fists came faster than kind words. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a sprawling structure of adobe and wood with a red tile roof, corrals spreading in every direction, cattle grazing in distant pastures. It was more prosperous than Violet had imagined, more solid and permanent than the rough frontier homestead she had pictured during the long journey west. Tom brought the wagon to a stop in front of the main house, and before Violet could gather her courage, the front door opened. Emmett Fitzgerald stepped onto the porch, and Violet's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and lean muscle earned from years of hard work. Sun-bronzed skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of whiskey in firelight. He wore simple clothes, work-worn denim and a faded blue shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, scuffed boots that had seen 1,000 miles of California earth. He looked nothing like the refined Boston gentleman Violet had grown up around, and everything like the wild freedom she had dreamed of in her most secret thoughts. Emmett crossed the porch in 3 long strides, his expression eager, almost boyish, as he approached the wagon. Violet forced herself to step down, to meet his eyes, to let him see what she had tried so hard to hide beneath her bonnet during the journey. His smile died instantly. The warmth in his amber eyes transformed to ice in a single heartbeat, his entire body going rigid as he stared at her battered face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and somehow more terrifying than a shout. "Where is he?" Violet took a step back, her hand instinctively rising to her bruised eye. It's nothing. It doesn't matter now." "Where is he?" Emmett repeated, and the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees despite the August heat. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles white with tension. Who did this to you? Please, I just want to forget. Violet's voice cracked, tears burning behind her eyes. I came here for a fresh start, to leave all of that behind. Tom had climbed down from the wagon, standing a respectful distance away but watching carefully. Emmett glanced at his foreman, then back at Violet, seeming to struggle with himself. Finally, he took a slow breath and unclenched his fists. "Come inside," he said, his voice still carrying that edge of cold fury but gentler now, controlled. "You've had a long journey. We can talk later." The interior of the ranch house surprised Violet with its comfort. Heavy wooden furniture, woven rugs on polished floors, curtains at the windows to keep out the harsh sunlight. A Mexican woman in her 50s appeared from what must be the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Rosa, this is Violet Vaughn," Emmett said, his voice still tight. "Please show her to the guest room and help her get settled. She'll need water for washing and something to eat." Rosa's dark eyes widened as she took in Violet's face, but she asked no questions, just nodded and gestured for Violet to follow. The guest room was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a window overlooking the ranch yard. "I bring water," Rosa said in accented English, her eyes kind. "You rest. Everything will be okay now, Mr. Emmett, he is good man." Alone in the room, Violet sank onto the edge of the bed and let the tears come. She had been so frightened, so desperate to escape Boston and her brother's increasingly violent temper. Gerald had always been cruel, but after their parents died 2 years ago and he inherited everything, his cruelty had turned physical. The night before she left, when she told him she was going to California to marry a rancher, he had struck her so hard she saw stars, calling her ungrateful, stupid, worthless. She had left anyway, because staying meant dying slowly under her brother's fists, and at least marriage to a stranger offered the possibility of something better. A soft knock on the door made her wipe her eyes hastily. "Come in." Rosa entered carrying a large pitcher of water and clean towels. She set them on the washstand, then turned to Violet with maternal concern. "Let me see." Before Violet could protest, Rosa had tilted her face toward the light, examining the bruise with gentle fingers. She made a clicking sound with her tongue and shook her head. "Men who hit women, they are cowards," Rosa said firmly. "But this man, whoever he is, he should be very afraid now. I work for Mr. Emmett 10 years. Never I see him so angry, his voice go cold like that. Someone is in trouble. He won't do anything foolish, will he?" Violet asked, alarm rising in her chest. "I don't want him getting hurt because of me. My brother Gerald, he's not. He's dangerous when he's angry." Rosa's expression softened. "Your brother did this, family." At Violet's nod, she sighed deeply. "This makes it worse for him, I think. Mr. Emmett, his mother was hurt by bad man when he was young boy. He does not forget. He does not forgive men who hurt women." The words settled over Violet like a blanket, equal parts comfort and concern. She washed her face carefully, wincing as the cool water touched her bruised skin, then changed into a clean dress from her trunk. When she emerged from the room an hour later, following the smell of cooking food to the dining room, she found Emmett waiting. He had cleaned up, shaved, changed into a fresh shirt. He stood when she entered, and she noticed he was careful not to move too quickly, not to startle her. The gesture touched something deep in her chest. "Please sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "Rosa's making her famous chicken enchiladas. I thought we could talk while we eat if you're up for it." Violet sat, and Emmett took the chair across from her rather than at the head of the table. The distance felt deliberate, respectful, giving her space. "I need to know what happened," he said quietly. "Not because I want to pry, but because I need to understand what brought you here like this." The The letters we exchanged, you never mentioned trouble at home." Violet folded her hands in her lap, staring at them. "I was ashamed. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't want me anymore. That you'd think I was damaged goods, not worth the trouble. Look at me, please." When she raised her eyes to his, she found no judgment there, only concern and that banked rage that simmered just beneath the surface. "Tell me everything." So she did. The words came haltingly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told him about her parents' death, about Gerald inheriting their father's shipping business and the house on Beacon Hill, about how he had always been cold and controlling, but how it had gotten worse after the inheritance, how he resented having to support a sister, how he drank too much and blamed her for everything wrong in his life. She told him about the bruises she had learned to hide, the broken ribs last winter that she had explained away as a fall on ice, the constant fear that had become her daily companion. "I saw your advertisement in the newspaper," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It seemed like divine providence, a chance to escape. We exchanged letters for 3 months and you seemed kind, decent. I saved every penny I could hide from Gerald, and when I told him I was leaving, She gestured at her eye. "He said no decent man would want me anyway, that I'd be back in a month begging him to take me in." Emmett's jaw worked, his hands flat on the table, fingers splayed. "How old is your brother?" 28. "Why?" "Just trying to decide whether beating him senseless would be fair, or if I should go easier on him since he's younger than me." Emmett's voice was conversational, but his eyes promised violence. "You can't go back to Boston," Violet said quickly. "It's 3 weeks' travel, and besides, he's not worth it. I'm safe now, that's all that matters." "You're right," Emmett said after a long moment. "You're safe now, and you'll stay safe." He paused, then continued carefully. "I want to make something clear. The arrangement we discussed in our letters about marriage, that still stands if you want it. But there's no rush. You can take all the time you need to recover, to get to know me, to make sure this is what you want. And if you decide you don't want to marry me, that's fine too. You have a place here regardless." Violet stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You would let me stay even if I don't marry you. You came here seeking safety and a new start," Emmett said. "I'm not going to take that away from you because things didn't go exactly as planned. You can work for the ranch if you want to earn your keep. Rosa's been saying she needs help with the household accounts and managing supplies. Or you can just rest and heal. Whatever you need." Something tight in Violet's chest began to loosen. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me." "I know you had the courage to cross a continent alone to escape a bad situation," Emmett said. "I know you're honest enough to sit here and tell me the truth even though you're afraid. That's enough for now." Rosa appeared with steaming plates of food, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Emmett told her about the ranch, how his father had started it 30 years ago with nothing but determination and a land grant. How Emmett had taken over after his father's death 5 years earlier and expanded the operation, breeding some of the finest cattle in California. He talked about the men who worked for him, the challenges of drought and disease, the satisfaction of building something lasting. Violet found herself relaxing, drawn in by his easy manner and genuine passion for the land. He asked about her life in Boston, and she told him about her love of reading, her talent for numbers that had frustrated her father who thought education wasted on daughters, her secret dreams of seeing the West. "I always imagined it as this wild, beautiful place where people could reinvent themselves," she said, then laughed self-consciously. "I suppose that sounds naive." "Not naive," Emmett said, his amber eyes warm. "Hopeful. There's a difference, and you're right in a way. Out here, what matters is what you do, not who your family was or what mistakes you've made. People get second chances if they're willing to work for them. Over the following days, Violet settled into the rhythm of ranch life. Her bruise began to fade from purple-black to green-yellow, still visible but less shocking. She took over the household accounts as Emmett had suggested, discovering that she had a knack for organizing the complex web of expenses and income that kept the ranch running. Rosa taught her to make tortillas and beans, laughing at her first clumsy attempts, then praising her when she got the technique right. Emmett was gone most days, working alongside his men to move cattle to new pastures, repair fences, break horses. But he always returned for dinner, always asked about her day, always treated her with a respect that still surprised her. He never pushed, never pressured, never made her feel obligated. It was that very gentleness that began to break down her walls. 2 weeks after her arrival, Violet was working in the small office off the main room, reconciling the feed bills, when she heard raised voices outside. She went to the window and saw Emmett talking with Tom and another man she didn't recognize. The stranger was dusty from travel, gesturing emphatically. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Emmett's expression darken, saw him nod once, then turn and stride toward the house. She barely had time to step back from the window before he entered the office. "That was a friend from town," he said without preamble. "Apparently, there's a man in San Diego asking questions about a woman who arrived on the stagecoach a few weeks ago. Tall, dark hair, green eyes. He's telling people he's her brother, that she ran away and he's come to bring her home." Violet's blood turned to ice. "Gerald, he followed me." "That's what I figured." Emmett's voice had gone cold again, that dangerous quiet that meant his anger was barely leashed. "He's staying at the hotel in town." "Making a nuisance of himself, threatening to get the law involved, claiming you stole money from him." "I didn't steal anything," Violet said quickly. "The money I used for the ticket was from my inheritance from our mother. She left each of us $500. Gerald tried to say it should all go into the business, but our father's lawyer made sure I got what was owed to me." "I believe you," Emmett said. "But even if you had taken every penny from his pockets, I wouldn't let him drag you back there." He paused, studying her face. "Do you want to see him?" "No," Violet said immediately. "Absolutely not. Good, because I wasn't planning on letting him near you anyway." Emmett started to turn, then stopped. "Stay here at the ranch for the next few days. Don't go into town. I'll handle this." "How?" "By making it very clear that you're under my protection, and he needs to get back on the next train to Boston." "What if he won't listen?" Violet asked, fear rising in her throat. "Gerald can be very stubborn when he wants something. Then I'll be more persuasive." Emmett's smile was not pleasant. "Don't worry, Violet. I won't let him hurt you again." He left before she could respond, calling for Tom to saddle his horse. Through the window, Violet watched him ride out with 2 of his men, heading toward town at a steady lope. The next hours passed with agonizing slowness. Rosa tried to distract her with chores, but Violet couldn't focus, jumping at every sound, imagining confrontations, violence, disaster. What if Gerald hurt Emmett? What if he convinced the sheriff that she had stolen from him? What if he somehow forced her to return to Boston? It was late afternoon when she heard horses in the yard. She rushed to the window and saw Emmett dismounting, his face grim but his movements unhurried. No blood, no obvious injuries. Behind him, his men led their horses to the stable. Violet met him at the door. "What happened?" "Let's sit down," Emmett said, removing his hat. In the main room, he poured himself a whiskey, downed it in one swallow, then poured another before settling into a chair. Violet perched on the edge of the sofa across from him, hands clasped tightly. "I found your brother at the hotel," Emmett began. He was in the saloon, drinking and complaining to anyone who would listen about his ungrateful sister. I introduced myself. And, Violet prompted when he paused. And I informed him that you were under my protection, that you had no intention of returning to Boston, and that he should leave on the next train east. Emmett's expression was neutral, but his eyes held that cold fury. He didn't take it well. What did he do? He tried to tell me you were unstable, that you were prone to making up stories, that you needed family to care for you. He said I had no legal right to keep you from him. Emmett took another sip of whiskey. So I asked him how you got that bruise on your face. Violet's breath caught. What did he say? He claimed you fell. Then he changed his story and said you were clumsy. Then he got angry and said it was none of my business how he disciplined his sister. Emmett's knuckles were white around the glass. That's when I hit him. You hit him. Violet's voice came out as a squeak. Broke his nose, I think, Emmett said calmly. Told him that was just a taste of what he'd get if he ever came near you again. Then Tom and Jack helped him understand that he wasn't welcome in this county, let alone on my ranch. Will there be trouble? Legal trouble. Sheriff Davis was there. He witnessed Gerald's version of events changing 3 times. He also knows me, knows I don't start fights without good reason. When I explained the situation, showed him the photograph of you from your first letter where your face was unmarked and described the bruise you arrived with, he was satisfied. Emmett finally met her eyes. Your brother left on the evening train. The sheriff escorted him to the station personally and made it clear that if he returns to California, he'll be arrested for assault. Violet felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of relief. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me for doing what any decent man would do. Emmett set down his glass and leaned forward, his expression intense. I want you to understand something, Violet. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid anymore. As long as you're here, you're safe. The words broke something open inside her, and suddenly she was crying in earnest, great gasping sobs that she couldn't control. Emmett crossed to the sofa and sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence, solid and steady. I was so scared, she managed between sobs. For so long I was just so scared all the time. I know, he said softly. I know, but that's over now. When she finally regained control, wiping her eyes with her handkerchief, she found Emmett watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something tender and fierce at the same time. I should let you rest, he said, standing. It's been an exhausting day. Emmett, wait. Violet rose as well, reaching out to touch his arm. He stopped, looking down at her hand on his sleeve. I want to marry you if the offer still stands. His eyes searched her face. You don't have to decide now. There's no pressure, I know, but I'm deciding anyway. Violet took a breath, gathering her courage. I came here hoping to find safety, and I found that, but I've also found kindness, respect, and someone who values me. Someone who protected me without asking for anything in return. I want to build a life with you if you'll still have me. If I'll still have you, Emmett repeated, his voice rough with emotion. Violet, I've wanted you since the moment I read your first letter. You were intelligent and honest and funny, and when you stepped off that wagon with your face bruised, I wanted to kill whoever had done that to you. Then I wanted to prove to you that not all men are like your brother, that you deserve to be cherished, not hurt. Then we'll marry, Violet said, smiling through her tears. We'll marry, Emmett agreed. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her uninjured cheek. I'm going to do everything in my power to make you happy, Violet Vaughn. That's a promise. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in San Diego, with Tom and Rosa standing as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Violet wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Rosa had helped her sew, and Emmett wore a new black suit that made him look like a gambler instead of a rancher. Father Miguel performed the ceremony in English and Spanish, blessing their union and their future children. When Emmett kissed her for the first time as her husband, his lips gentle against hers, Violet felt the last shadows of fear finally lift. This was real. This was her life now. She was Violet Fitzgerald, wife of a California rancher, and she was free. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, food and music and dancing under the stars. Ranch hands mingled with townspeople. Rosa directed the serving with military precision, and Emmett never let go of Violet's hand except when they danced. "Are you happy?" he asked as they swayed to a fiddle tune, his arms strong around her. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Violet answered honestly. "It feels like a dream. If it's a dream, I hope we never wake up." Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, Emmett patient with her nervousness, careful not to frighten her. He kissed away her tears and whispered promises against her skin, and when they finally came together, Violet felt whole for the first time in her life. The months that followed were a revelation. Autumn came to San Diego with cooler temperatures and occasional rain, and Violet threw herself into learning everything about ranch life. She rode out with Emmett to check on the cattle, learning to sit a horse properly and appreciate the vast beauty of the California landscape. She worked alongside Rosa in the kitchen, mastering the art of sourdough bread and beef stew that could feed a dozen hungry cowboys. She took over all the ranch accounts and correspondence, her neat handwriting and head for numbers making the business run more efficiently. But more than the work, she reveled in the simple joy of being with Emmett. Every morning he kissed her goodbye before heading out to work, and every evening he returned to her with stories of his day. They ate dinner together, walked together in the cool evenings, sat by the fire and talked about their hopes and dreams. He never raised his voice to her, never lifted his hand in anger, never made her feel small or worthless. Instead, he made her feel cherished. Winter brought cold rains and the hard work of moving cattle to lower pastures. One of the ranch hands broke his leg, and Violet surprised everyone, including herself, by setting it properly with Rosa's guidance. The man recovered fully, and word spread that the boss's wife was good in a crisis. Spring of 1879 arrived with wildflowers blanketing the hills, and the discovery that Violet was pregnant. She told Emmett one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses in the stable. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, apologizing for being too rough. "Are you happy?" she asked, laughing at his sudden concern. "Happy." "Violet, I'm—" He seemed to search for words, then gave up and just kissed her instead. The pregnancy was not easy. Violet suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the summer heat made her swollen ankles worse. But Emmett was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting she rest, bringing her water and cool cloths, rubbing her aching back in the evenings. "You're going to be an impossible father," she teased him one night as he fussed over her pillows. "Our child will never get away with anything. Our child will know they're loved and protected," Emmett said firmly. "That's all that matters." Their son was born in October 1879, arriving after 12 hours of labor attended by Rosa and the doctor from town. Emmett paced the length of the house until Rosa finally told him to go check on the cattle, or she would shoot him herself. He was back within the hour, unable to stay away. When Rosa finally emerged to tell him he had a son, Emmett nearly knocked her over in his rush to get to the bedroom. Violet lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face. Emmett sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. "He's so small." "He's actually quite large, according to the doctor," Violet said, wincing. 8.5 pounds. Can I hold him?" When Violet nodded, Emmett took the baby with surprising confidence, cradling him against his chest. The infant made a small sound, and Emmett's face transformed with love. "Hello, little one. I'm your father. I'm going to teach you to ride and rope and work cattle. I'm going to show you how to treat people with respect, especially women. And I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing you're loved." Violet felt tears slide down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. This was her family, her husband and her son. The life she had built from the ashes of her old one. They named him Ethan James Fitzgerald, and he was spoiled outrageously by everyone on the ranch. Tom whittled him toys, Rosa sang him lullabies in Spanish, and the Cowboys competed to see who could make him laugh the hardest. But no one loved him more fiercely than his father, who checked on him multiple times a night and could calm his crying with a few murmured words. The years flowed like honey, sweet and golden. Ethan grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair, fearless and full of laughter. The ranch prospered, allowing Emmett to buy more land and increase the herd. Violet became known throughout the county for her business acumen, and other ranchers started asking her advice on managing their accounts. In the spring of 1881, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with Violet's green eyes and a temper that made everyone laugh. They named her Alina Rose, and she ruled the household from her first breath. Emmett was, as Violet had predicted, completely wrapped around his daughter's tiny fingers. "You were right," he admitted one evening, watching Alina sleep in her cradle while Ethan played with wooden horses on the floor. "I'm impossible as a father. She smiled at me today and I nearly cried." "You did cry," Violet corrected, kissing his cheek. "I saw you." "Well, she's perfect." What else was I supposed to do? Life was not without challenges. There were droughts and floods, cattle diseases and injured workers, financial worries and long, hard days. But they faced everything together, Violet's quick mind complementing Emmett's steady determination. They built something lasting, not just a ranch but a home, a family, a legacy. One evening in late summer of 1882, Violet stood on the porch watching Emmett teach Ethan to rope a fence post while Alina napped inside. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the air smelled of grass and dust and home. Emmett noticed her watching and handed the rope to Ethan, then crossed the yard to join her on the porch. He slipped his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice rumbling against her back. "About how different my life could have been," Violet said softly. "If I hadn't found your advertisement. If I hadn't had the courage to leave Boston. If you had turned me away when you saw my bruised face." "I could never have turned you away," Emmett said. "You walked off that wagon looking terrified and brave at the same time, and I knew I would do anything to make you feel safe. I just didn't expect to fall in love with you so completely." Violet turned in his arms to face him. "When did you know that you loved me?" "The first time I saw you smile, really smile without fear in your eyes. It was about a month after you arrived. Rosa had made tamales, and you got masa all over your face trying to help, and you laughed so hard you nearly fell over. That's when I knew." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "When did you know?" "The day you came back from confronting Gerald," Violet said. "You broke his nose for me." You could have just warned him off, but you made sure he understood what it felt like to be hurt by someone stronger. That's when I knew you would always protect me, always value me, and that's when I started falling. Just started. Emmett's eyes danced with amusement. Fine. That's when I fell completely and irrevocably in love with you. She rose on her toes to kiss him. Happy now. Happier than I ever thought possible, he said against her lips. From the yard, Ethan called out that he had successfully roped the post, and they broke apart to go celebrate his achievement. As Violet walked hand in hand with her husband toward their son, she thought about the girl who had arrived in California 4 years ago, bruised and terrified and hoping for nothing more than safety. She had found so much more than that. She had found love, partnership, family, and a place where she belonged. She had found herself, the person she was always meant to be, strong and capable and worthy of every good thing. The girl from Boston was gone, replaced by a woman who could birth calves and balance books, who could shoot a rifle and soothe a crying baby, who could stand beside her husband as an equal partner in building their dreams. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Violet and Emmett lay in bed talking about the future. They wanted more children, at least 2 more. They wanted to expand the ranch further south, maybe build a second house for Tom when he eventually retired. They wanted to send their children to good schools, to give them opportunities while teaching them the value of hard work. You ever regret it? Emmett asked suddenly. Leaving your old life behind, you came from society, culture, theaters, and libraries. Here you have dust and cattle and hard work. Violet rolled over to face him, her hand on his chest feeling the steady beat of his heart. I don't miss it for a second. That world was full of pretty things that meant nothing. Here I have things that matter. A husband who loves me, children who need me, work that fulfills me. This is real, Emmett. Everything before was just pretending. I love you, Violet Fitzgerald, he said, his voice thick with emotion. More than I can ever express properly. Then show me, she whispered. And he did, with gentle hands and passionate kisses, with whispered words and tender touches, until they were both breathless and complete. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. Another son arrived in 1883, Matthew William, quieter than his siblings but with a gift for gentling horses that amazed everyone. Then came another daughter in 1885, Sarah Jane, as fierce and independent as her older sister. The ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in Southern California. Emmett's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread throughout the state. Violet's management kept them profitable even in difficult years. Together they employed over 30 ranch hands, most of whom stayed for years, treated fairly and paid well. Ethan grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Eleanor became a teacher, educating ranch children and children from neighboring properties. Matthew took over the horse breeding operation, developing a line of working horses that were in demand throughout the West. Sarah became a doctor, one of the first women to graduate from medical school in California, then returned to practice in San Diego. Through it all, Violet and Emmett remained the steady center, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned the loss of friends like Tom, who passed peacefully in 1895, and Rosa, who lived to the remarkable age of 82. They traveled occasionally, taking the train to San Francisco or Los Angeles, but they always returned home to the ranch, to the land that had given them everything. On their 25th wedding anniversary in September 1903, their children threw them a party that brought together people from all over the county. There was music and dancing, speeches and toasts, and enough food to feed an army. As the sun set and lanterns were lit across the yard, Emmett pulled Violet onto the makeshift dance floor for a waltz. 25 years, he said, his amber eyes still as warm as the day she first saw them. And you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. You're getting sentimental in your old age, Violet teased, though her own eyes were misty. I'm 53, not ancient, and I'm not sentimental, just honest. He spun her carefully, mindful of her knee that ached sometimes in cold weather. I meant what I said on our wedding day. I would do everything in my power to make you happy. Did I succeed? Violet looked around at their children, now grown with families of their own, at the grandchildren running between the tables. At the ranch they had built together through hard work and determination. At the community they had become part of, respected and valued. Then she looked back at her husband, at the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen to protect rather than exploit, to cherish rather than harm. You succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, she said softly. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. Safety, yes, but also love and partnership and a family. You gave me myself, Emmett, the person I was always meant to be. Then I'm the richest man in California, he said, pulling her close, because you gave me the same thing. Purpose and love and a reason to be better than I was. They danced until the musicians grew tired, surrounded by family and friends, by the life they had built from a single act of courage and a train ticket west. When they finally retired to bed in the early hours of morning, exhausted but happy, Emmett held Violet close and whispered the same words he had said every night for 25 years. I love you, Violet Fitzgerald, today, tomorrow, and always. And I love you, Emmett Fitzgerald, with everything I am. Outside, the California night was peaceful, stars glittering above the ranch that had become their kingdom. Inside, two people who had found each other across distance and circumstance, who had built something beautiful from broken pieces, slept peacefully in each other's arms. The years rolled on. Emmett passed away peacefully in the spring of 1921 at the age of 71, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, his hand held tightly by the woman he had loved for over 4 decades. His last words were of her, his last smile for her, his last breath drawn while looking into her eyes. Violet followed him 18 months later, unable to bear too long without her partner, her protector, her love. She died in the same bed where they had shared 43 years of marriage, her mind full of memories of a dusty afternoon in August 1878, when she stepped off a stagecoach with a black eye and found a man who asked, "Where is he?" in a voice gone cold with protective fury. She was buried beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch, their shared headstone bearing simple words, "Together in life, together in eternity." Their children continued the ranch, then their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren after that. The Fitzgerald Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over dominance, and hope over despair. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the sun sets over the Pacific and paints the California hills in gold, people say they can see two figures walking hand in hand through the ranch yard, still together, still in love, still dancing to music only they can hear. The story of the mail-order bride who arrived with a black eye and the cowboy whose voice went cold became legend in San Diego, passed down through generations as a reminder that true love protects, that real strength shows mercy, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is accept the help they need to build the life they deserve.